Hello and welcome to Feral Thinkers Podcast on streaming television with a cord cut. This is podcast number 4. We're going to talk about the Criterion Collection, Hulu's The Path, some tweets from Mr. Robot, and the unbearable heaviness of anticipation for Tyrant's imminent premiere tomorrow night. Even when I was still in high school, my girlfriend and I would get out of school on Friday afternoons and pore over both the city and the university newspapers. We would make a schedule that optimized the number of movies that we could see between Friday afternoon and Sunday night. This was before the commercial viability of VCRs, so student organizations at the university rented large auditorium classrooms which were equipped with projection booths and movie screens and easily doubled as theaters in the evening. This sort of fundraising apparently started on the Harvard campus by the two guys who eventually founded Janus Films, a distribution company that specialized in bringing the great directors to college campuses. In retrospect, I'm glad I saw these films in those auditoriums because the ambiance there is much closer to what the movies are all about. The apparatus is an important, if mostly invisible, part of filmmaking, and there's a great deal of magic in the full-sized screen. I was delighted because I had been brought up on films of a limited sort, mostly the kind that make it to television, but now I was seeing movies made by the people who invented and reinvented cinema. Janus Films and the Criterion Collection are two separate entities, but they have long worked closely together. Criterion specializes in distribution and packaging for the post-theatrical market, DVDs and streaming, which is exactly what this podcast is about. Hulu has more than 900 films from the Criterion Collection, that arbiter of films that kept college campuses so cinematically interesting in the evenings before the advent of the VCR. Renoir, Godard, Kurosawa, Cocteau, Fellini, Bergman, Tarkovsky, Hitchcock, Fuller, Lean, Kubrick, Lang, Sturges, Dreyer, Eisenstein, Ozu, Cirque, Buñuel, Powell, and Pressburger were there, and now it dizzies me to say they're on Hulu. That's why I love on-demand streaming. All the good things of the past are coming back to haunt me. You can join me on Hulu right now and get 2 weeks free. Go to feralthinker.com and click on the link at the bottom that says join me on Hulu and get 2 weeks free. That will take you to Hulu and they will help you from there. One of the shows that I streamed from Hulu this past spring was The Path. If you can imagine a cross between Scientology, Jim Jones, maybe even a touch of David Koresh's Branch Davidians, you're getting close. The religion following The Path is called Myerism, after its founder who supposedly had mystical revelations during a ritualistic hallucinogenic experience in South America. Although Myerism is based primarily in the U.S., its Mount Sinai is in Peru, where those revelations occurred. The core of its cast comprises Michelle Monaghan as Sarah Lane, who is Myerist from birth. Myerism was born in hallucinogenic experience, so it's not inconsistent that Sarah Lane's father chain smokes joints, but it still amuses me. Aaron Paul plays Sarah's husband, Eddie Lane. While on a recent trip to South America, Eddie has revealed to him not some spiritual truth, but the drier, more disappointing kind of truth, which has thrown him into a tailspin crisis of faith. Sarah presumes that the deep, dark secret that her husband is hiding is an affair, and she is full of the cheated-upon wife's angst. The how-to manuals of Myerism prescribe rigorous procedures for repairing a marriage after such a breach. But Eddie plays along with them even though he has been faithful, because what's really bothering him would have even more disastrous consequences. Hugh Dancy is Cal Roberts, the ranking cleric in America and a showman in the pulpit. He is also a mostly recovering alcoholic who nevertheless slips off the wagon at bad moments. Cal, too, knows there are no true mystical secrets tied up in the heart of Myerism, but unlike Disillusioned Eddie, Cal becomes even more enthusiastic and zealous about leading his followers into the light. Dr. Stephen Meyer, by the way, is played by Kerr Dahlia, who was one of the astronauts on board the Discovery mission to Jupiter in 2001: A Space Odyssey. He was the one who faced off with the mysterious monolith in that even more mysterious hotel room at the end of the movie. Stephen, too, in his hospital bed in the Myrist compound in the Peruvian Andes, likewise seems ready to face off with a portal to the light. The Path features highly talented actors and even small supporting roles. Rockmond Dunbar is especially noteworthy as an FBI investigator whose marriage is torn by a sick infant and too much time spent infiltrating the Myrist compound. Rather than being a supportive family man in a crisis, he's off in a land of sky pilots, and Dunbar pulls off some emotionally piercing scenes. I've become conditioned to searching for the Kleenex whenever he pops up in an episode. Speaking of popping up, I was also surprised to recognize Clark Middleton, who played Ernie in Kill Bill Volume 2. You remember Ernie. When Michael Madsen subdues Uma Thurman with a chest full of rock salt and the threat of a whole can of pepper spray in her eyes, it's Ernie who does Madsen's dirty work for him and digs up Paula Schultz to make a space for, well, let's just call her Uma Thurman so I don't have to beep anything out. If you thought the little guy crawling up out of Paula's grave was bad, then you should see how he shoots people full of psychedelic drugs and locks them in a jail cell as the Myrist call to Jesus for those who have wondered in their fate. I've told you too much already, but it's a great show. I watched it as it first became available, one episode per week, and now I'm stuck in the long wait for this show. I've gotten myself so enthused by telling you about it, I might have to go watch it again. It's now available in its entirety for download, Season 1, so you don't have to wait at all. I have been following Mr. Robot on Twitter. The officially blue checkmarked Twitter ID is Who is Mr. Robot, run together as a single word, all lowercase, no caps. Mr. Robot, tomorrow night, all of our questions, the consequences, spoilers will be lifted for Tyrant as it debuts its third season on the more we ignore them. I'm running out of time to catch up on Tyrant government of the people premieres tomorrow night. Episode 2.12 like these, it's easy to forget that Mr. Robot is produced by Universal Cable Productions, which is owned by NBC Universal, 10 or 12 weeks to answer upward. If you notice, there was a general pattern. As much fun in the first season, the conflict was really in-house and mostly embraces Jamal and Bassam. And the second season was it's all fun as a saner alternative to Jamal against the invading guerrillas and also against Ibrahim Rashid's forces. And I'm kind of thinking that it looks like the third season we're going to be back into a palace intrigue mode because the invaders have been quashed, but not really, have they? Come to think of it, the foreign invaders have, but the liberation movement is still in place, and the liberation movement, though, really looks to Bassam as a potential leader, despite his being an al-Fayed. So you see, there's still questions everywhere. And what about Jamal? How badly was he wounded? He looked to me like he had head wounds. That he was like RFK'd out of there, but he might still be with us. On Game of Thrones, Arya took multiple deep abdominal stab wounds, and she got over that pretty quick. So who knows? Jamal might be ready for Wheaties tomorrow night. That's it for today's podcast. Thanks so much for listening. You can follow this program through my blog at dmasonwest.com, or you can follow along through any of my social network presences, which are listed at feralthinker.com. This podcast is published daily with a release at 4 p.m. Central U.S. time or 2100 hours Greenwich Mean Time. Thanks.